Hey, I wanted to pop in briefly before this video starts to provide an update about a bit of drama surrounding the use of fake op amps in these V3 amps. There's been a number of accusations thrown around that Fosi was using a fake NE5532 op amp. It was measuring fine, just as it should, but looked a little bit different than some of the other examples that are available. I want to commend Fosi here. They stepped up in the forums and answered all the questions surrounding the topics really quickly. They even supplied the sales order showing their op-amp purchases directly from Texas Instruments. A question remained about why there was a different appearance between chips, and that had a simple answer as well. The chips were being manufactured from multiple sites, one in Mexico and another in China. They received chips from both manufacturing sites, and each chip has small variances in appearance. Thankfully, this one was cleared up pretty quickly, as something like this would have really tarnished the image of this amp. We can now say with almost certainty that genuine parts are being used here. I say keep up the good work, Fosi, and thanks for being transparent. Now let's get back to the video review, and please stick around for the end when we disassemble to take a look at the internals and possibly some limitations on space for swapping op amps.
Is this another cheap Class D amp clone of all the rest, or do we actually have something a bit different here?
Diamond in the rough.
First of all, I actually enjoy the craziness of the budget Class D market. Every time I turn around, we get something new. And for the most part, the companies have been looking to innovate. Products are getting better and end users are taking notice. You can, for the most part, take your particular needs, then look for the amp that best fits your space. And there's going to be likely several to choose from. But today we have a new competitor that might have took the biggest leap in desktop size amps to date, the Fosi V3. In this video, I will look at the new design, where they improved, the true wattage outputs, as well as disassembly and op amps. Hey, just to pull you aside for just a brief moment, could you please consider liking and subscribing to the channel? Giving me that subscription directly feeds my ability to get more gear. It's also a great way to support a small channel like this. It will allow me to get in more gear, as well as upgrade the equipment I use to test. I'm planning to get into some measurements in the near future. Fosi elevated their game in a number of ways with this one. They took the criticism and comments from the forums and reviews and really set out to break their competition.
I must break you.
First, we'll take a look at the exterior. It actually has a bit of weight to it. Not that weight is an analytical measurement, but it's at the very least a psychological association with higher quality or premium products. Also, to be honest, it's nice to have a little weight so it doesn't slide all over your desk when you're making adjustments. The exterior doesn't have any visible screws in the front, and it almost has a topping LA90 vibe to it with that large knob in the center. Speaking of the volume knob, it's an improvement over past designs. It uses a tapered A-type potentiometer, basically just a finer way, more suitable to the human ear. And just so you're aware, this is just an amp. Just like the A07, no Bluetooth, we just have a single dial in the front that serves as both volume and the power switch. Turning it around, we have the RCAs for input, and a preamp out for things like daisy chaining and connecting a sub-amp. Beyond that, the typical small speaker terminals that I always wish were a little bit bigger, then the power supply input. Looking at the top, we have some really nice ventilation, but that really isn't the best part about this new method of managing heat. If we flip it over, we see additional ventilation, but also a pair of screws that are connected to a heatsink. They're actually utilizing the entire case as a heatsink. What they did here was remove the amp chip from the top side of the board and actually isolated it underneath, which was a really good idea. Get it out of the way from things like all the capacitors that are right next to it if you were to look at the inside of an A07. There's no thermal paste or anything like that binding the heatsink to the chassis, so I suppose you could add some if you desire. From my experience, I doubt you'll need to. It seems to tolerate temperatures very well with this design. Looking at the top side of the board, we can take a closer look at some of the components used. One of the main points Fosi has been promoting is the improved internals, and yeah, they actually did make quite a few changes here. There's a soft start resistor now, Japanese audio inductors, German WEMA capacitors, and two large NCC filter capacitors. And a feature we often see lately, the swappable op amps. It comes stock with the NE5532s. You'll need a pair of these if you're looking to replace them. I myself don't have the tools for measuring these yet, but it's something I'm looking into getting for future tests. So for today, we're going to borrow some of the stats from ASR, as Amir is very thorough at gathering this information. Sinag came out to around 88 dB, which is well above average and certainly well above the typical point in this price range. The 32-volt power supply produced 62 watts into 4 ohms, and the 48 actually outputted 141 watts. That's a serious number there. At 8 ohms, the 32 volt produced 34 watts, and the 48 volt 89. So as we can see, the 32 volt definitely produces usable power, but the 48 volt is an absolute powerhouse relative to its size. I myself would recommend going this route, the 48 volt. They designed the new case to handle the heat, so I figure we may as well use it as intended. Plus these actually have a 2-year warranty, so why not push it? And in all likelihood, 24 months from now, we'll be talking about the V5 Pro that has tone controls, Bluetooth, and I don't know, a blender and an air fryer built in. Kidding aside, these models see improvements in new designs rapidly, and I do appreciate it. It's been both interesting and fun to see how quickly they're making changes and pursuing the interests of the market space. So what would you like to see next on these amps? Any particular features? I myself would like to see a sub pre-out with a crossover switch, something that would allow me to select full range or say something like 90 Hz, take the load off the amp in the more demanding frequencies, and let the sub take over. That way we could get even more out of these little amps. Maybe another fun feature would be monoblocks. Not necessary likely when these are going to be sitting on your desk in all likelihood, but for whatever reason, people enjoy it. And honestly, I would likely buy it too just to experiment. So who's this one for? I think it's for anyone really. It appears to be a really good option at under $100. Actually, the best option under $100 if you don't need things like tone controls or Bluetooth built in. My suggestion here would be to pick up a sub $100 Wii Mini and have a complete system capable of several streaming methods for under $200. The Wii is going to act as your preamp and your volume control. If you go with the 48 volt power supply, your speaker pairings will be mostly wide open as well. If you want to stay within the budget theme, grab a pair of ELAC BS41s, that might be the cheapest, or debut 5.2s, Polk XT15s, or JBL A130s. You can always keep an eye out for the Sony SSCS5 deal, but those have been creeping higher and higher in the prices, it seems. Basically, there's a lot of options out there to put together a reasonably budget system that'll put a smile on your face. Thanks for watching today. If you enjoy this content, please give me a like and a subscribe. A lot more to come. Stick around and I'll disassemble the V3, take a look at the op amps and some of the other features on this new model. So these little amps are pretty easy to take apart. You can just pull that front knob off. It's just a friction fit. And then remove the 2 screws on the back. Once you have those out, then you can flip it over. And there's 2 screws on the bottom that are actually connecting it to the heat sink. After that, you can just use a socket to remove the final nut that was behind the volume dial. From there, you can pretty much just slide the front plate off, then pull from the back and the entire board will come out. Once we have the board out, you can see some of the changes they made here, some of the new parts, and especially this big space in the center that would have had the old amp chip, but that has since been moved to the back where we have the heatsink. You can see here I have an op-amp riser installed. The Sparkos dual discrete op-amps will require it to fit. The riser simply snaps in place and the op-amp sockets directly into it. It's a really simple fit after that. It's still a bit tight on space, but it looks like we have just enough to make this work. So that just about does it. I just want to thank everyone for watching today. Take care and have a good one.